This conference will now be recorded.
Thursday, January 9th, Town Council meeting to order. Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for coming. Just stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do have a public hearing to kick things off tonight, so I'll entertain a motion to enter the public hearing.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The public hearing tonight is with regard to accepting a conservation easement for 279 West Street. This is the property that's next to the Home Goods, and is Atlas Construction, I think, is the sign that I'm seeing out there, and it has been through planning and zoning. Restaurant, I believe, is what they're planning on. Shake Shack, that's right. This is Shake Shack location, yeah. With some kind of a garden out back, too, I understand. But this is part of the deal agreement for moving forward with this project with a conservation easement on a kind of wetlands property behind it. Are there any questions from the public or comments from the public on this? Yeah.
Could you tell me what a conservation easement is?
Yeah. Brandon, yeah, go ahead.
Well, in fact, I see we've got, I'm happy to do that, but Hiram zoomed in tonight just for this. So Hiram, you want to give Conservation Easement 101 in a quick overview?
About a half hour's worth.
Nah.
Hold on, I think I muted him. Hold on.
Hang on one second, Hiram. We're still unmuting you.
It's not letting me. I think he's caller one. Is this products?
Technology.
Okay, let's try that.
How about now?
Now Hiram's on mute.
Hold on.
No.
There we go.
There he is.
Okay, let's try it.
How about
Hiram,
that?
can
Can
you
you hear me? Okay. This particular property is a unique property along 44 because it has a stream that flows through it. It also has a sewer line next to the stream. It has a series of wetlands on the property. It also has a vernal pool in the rear of the property. So it's kind of unique in that it has a series of environmental constraints, if you will. And the commission, when it approved this, wanted to be very careful that it not be overdeveloped. And so the conservation easement that was reached after, I must say, protracted discussion with the developer is what you have in front of you. The commission would like to make sure that the property is carefully developed. And so the reason for the conservation easement is that the easement will be mapped in accordance with the plan that was submitted to the commission. And that was agreed to by the developer as well. So we're hopeful that that property will be not only significantly upgraded in the near future, but also protected environmentally as well. And that's it in a nutshell.
So in summary, Hiram, it's an easement to the town that protects the property. So because we're accepting the easement, hence the public hearing.
I can't hear it.
Okay.
All right. Are there any other comments from audience? Questions from audience?
I'm sorry, I lost the sound. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was asking if there are any other questions or comments from the audience. And if not, then let's see. So I'll ask if are there any comments or questions from council. If not, then I'll take a motion to exit the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'll take a motion to accept the easement.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we have minutes to preceding meetings. Is the December 5th meeting minutes. Do we have any changes required? Requested? If not, then I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Communication from audience. Do we have any communication from audience tonight? Going once, going twice, anything online? If not, then I will move to communication from council. Anthony?
Yeah, so I'm sure that others will mention in depth our thoughts. I hate saying thoughts and prayers to the residents and firefighters out in California. I know how much the state rallied for our fire we had down there along the Merrick Park, not the Merrick Park, Berlin area and up on the mountains and the ridges there. I can only imagine the challenges you see on TV with everything that's going on there and burned right to the ocean. So anyway, it's been on my mind.
Yeah.
So, that's it.
Margaret?
Let's see. I'll start with this. I just happened to notice today is National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. So I thought I'd say
Appreciate
thank you to law enforcement. And I'm sure everyone would acknowledge that too. And did you want to talk about the Eagle Scout?
Oh, sure. I can, but yeah, sure.
We both went to the Eagle Scout ceremony. It was the Court of Honor. It was great. And Dan can go into detail. He had a great speech. And Aaron and I were happy to just sit in the audience and not have to do a speech. So, but we appreciated all the Eagle Scouts and the former ones who were there, who participated in the ceremony. It's an interesting ceremony.
Yeah, it was a great ceremony, and I think that was the most council members I've seen at one so far. So that's great. I know Aaron was one of the sponsors for one of the projects, one of the Eagle projects, and I know you have a history with the Eagle Scouts as well. With the son was an Eagle Scout,
Yeah.
and Neil used to be. Sorry, not Neil. Ken used to be
He was active for quite a while.
an assistant scoutmaster. So I know it means a lot to the kids in particular.
Yeah.
To get us out there. They actually organized the whole ceremony. They're responsible for organizing the ceremony and choosing who comes and speaks. And it means a lot to them to have the various elected officials come and recognize them. So yeah, thank you everybody or Aaron and Margaret in particular for coming out to that. I guess since I'm talking, I'll go ahead and finish. But I'll say for the Fisher. The Fisher building, the Board of Ed building. It's a good meeting, lots of good questions. I thought it went really well, and I'm glad that we have found a solution. I think it was a responsible solution for the town. I think that'll be a good investment for us over the long term, particularly compared to how much it would have cost us to fix up the existing building. It was a great turnout. Over 200 people, I think.
Yeah, well, it was
Biggest turnout I've seen in one of those. So
230 that voted, I think.
So yeah, glad that's behind us. On to the next thing. So, and Happy New Year, everybody. Go ahead, Barb.
Happy New Year to everybody also. Following up on that, I did want to thank everyone who came out, during the very busy holiday season. Seems like the time between Thanksgiving and school breaks is like that. And I want to thank town and school officials, Board of Education, Board of Finance, and town council members, who worked very hard on finding a solution for that building. That being said, I do feel compelled to sort of address what I was surprised at in terms of how members voted. And this is not meant as a personal attack, but I do feel that it's something that I've had residents ask me about. And I just, I know we're going into a municipal election season, and I'm hoping we can all sort of stay on track. And, Heather McGuire used to always say, leave your party at the door. And I feel like we all work together very well and very hard in the best interests of the residents. We can have differences, but I feel like we would hope to be able to trust what people say and to stick with that. The three boards had numerous discussions and opportunities to ask questions, to voice opposition, have concerns addressed, and in the end, at their respective meetings, all three boards voted unanimously to move forward with the vote for the Board of Ed building. And to me, that carries weight. It signals to the community that due diligence has been done, and the people that they elected to put on these boards have listened and asked their questions and come to an agreement. And when it's unanimous, it means regardless of party, everybody came to an agreement. So I'm disappointed that a member of this council and of the Board of Finance voted in that unanimous support of the project and then voted against it. Of course, you're a private citizen, you can vote any way you want, but I think when you're a member of a board, again, I think it carries a little bit of different weight, because I think residents rely on those of us who are elected to represent them with transparency and integrity. And sitting in meetings and stating that you support a project only to then vote against it is misleading. And I think residents look to board members for guidance on projects. It affects their day-to-day life, their taxes, their bottom line, education. And now there's been at least 3 occasions in the last year where this has happened. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's a lack of understanding. I don't know if it's outside influences after the fact. Sure, people can change their mind, and maybe that's it. But in any case, I feel it's misleading and disingenuous, not only to the residents, but to fellow board members. And I'm left feeling that I don't know what I can believe. Like, do you mean what you say? And again, since this is an election year that we're going into, and we're all neighbors, and while we may have differences, I always enjoy when we're at events together and we get to chat. So I just hope moving forward, we don't need to ask that question anymore. And that, your vote is your vote. So I had to get that off my chest. So thank you for indulging me. And that's all I have. I guess it's you.
Thank you, Barbara. So for those that are maybe not aware, I hold a position on the board for the Farmington Valley Health District. And the Farmington Valley Health District, for members of the audience that don't know, represent many towns in the Farmington Valley. And so we're just one town of about, I think, Brandon, 7. Mm-hmm. And we pay into the Farmington Valley Health District dependent on the size of our population, and therefore they work for every single town that is in the district. And one of the major projects that they just completed is something called the Community Health Improvement Plan. Many of our residents actually participated in this. They created, after many meetings of discussion with different community members who hold different roles in social services or environmental science, they came up with 4 priority areas: healthy eating, active living, mental health, optimal well-being for older adults, and emerging environmental health concerns, and created goals and strategies for addressing these public health issues. And the director of the Farmington Valley Health District will come around to each town and meet with key people in the town to make sure that they understand what the Farmington Valley came up with and how these goals can be reached. But in addition to that, there's a beautiful booklet that they made that has all these goals and priorities in them. And it's really very, very thorough. So, for example, Jennifer Cortanis, who's the director, will meet with Jennifer Bennett in the senior center and talk about the goals and priorities that came up and what the senior center and the town can do to make sure that these goals are reached. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything more about that, Brandon.
I think you did a great job. Yeah.
So it's like a yearly?
So actually they do it every 5 years. So this is the goals that we have over the next 5 years to accomplish. And they're very concrete goals too. It's not just like eat healthier. They're very concrete and like, how can we do that in the schools? How can we do that with seniors? How can we get the message across of like, what is healthy eating? It's very thorough.
At some point, I think we should probably have Jennifer come in and give you all an update, because the district over the last year or so, has been doing a lot of planning work. So there's the CHIP, which is what Aaron is talking about. At our meeting on Tuesday this week, we adopted a organization-wide strategic plan, which is required as part of our accreditation process. So there's been a lot of heavy lifting in really good activity. So we'll get Jennifer to come in, put some context around it and talk with you. But
Yeah.
Aaron, of course, has been a big part of that.
I'm trying to make sure that I bring back what we talk about at these district meetings, because we're really trying to, as part of our strategic plan, have health be one of the things that we consider with projects and plans and programs that we put in place. Like when we think about affordable housing, health plays a part in that. And what should we be thinking about when we're, choosing a group that's going to create affordable housing? Where should it be in town? Things like that. So more to come from the health district. And then I just wanted to report back from the committee, the group that is helping, the group that's helping organize Avon 250, which is the 250th celebration of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We will have our first meeting next week on the 16th at 7 p.m. here. Again, the people that are in this group are myself and Norm Sonheimer, Terry Wilson, and Ann Fitzgerald from the Daughters of the American Revolution. And we're really just contacting as many organizations in town as we can. So far, we've contacted about 40 organizations to come and hear about what Avon 250 is, and to have them brainstorm what can they do to celebrate this. And it doesn't have to be in July of 2026. It can be all throughout the year of 2026. It can be something that's historically relevant to the signing of the Declaration of Independence or the Revolutionary War, or it can be about where we've come from, like what immigrant groups have moved into Avon, the canal history, the Farmington Canal, just anything that's happened that we can celebrate, but also things like show the World Cup on a big movie theater outside. So just like fun events as well for the community. So we're going to start brainstorming starting next week.
Great.
And that's it.
What was the date again?
The 16th at 7 p.m. And there's also a virtual option thanks to Grace.
Will that be sent out on the town? No?
At this moment, I think we're trying to just reach organizations. We haven't completed our full list yet. So I just emailed Norm to say, did you reach out to fire and police? Because we just keep thinking of more people that we want to make sure we get involved. There will eventually be an e-blast out to the general residents of the community to say, if you hold an interest in this topic, if there's something that you have an idea for to celebrate, please come and let us know. But the initial meeting is to try to reach out to the big organizations.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Aaron.
Is this a big enough space for you?
We hope so, but as Norm says, so we have a virtual option, but Norm says, you invite however many you're going to invite, and then you make the room to fit just that amount so it feels important. So it might be
fire marshal to cover his ears.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Aaron.
You're welcome.
That's a good segue into our first order of old business. We have the Avon Volunteer Fire Station Building Committee update. Jim and Jamie are here to talk to us about this. Thank you both for your service, obviously within the fire department, but also on the building committee, and helping this continue to move forward. In your packets, you have this is like a Q&A response to several of the questions that came up when this was presented to us. I guess there's two parts of this discussion today. One is, I think, to go through, answer any questions you have regarding cost and cost drivers, questions along those lines, and then the next, and then maybe the subsequent question to get to is, where do we want to go from here? I have some thoughts on that, but I'll wait until after we get through the Q&A section of this.
So,
Do you want to?
Yeah.
First of all, did we answer the question?
Yeah.
I want to make sure we answered the questions you asked. These are what we thought we heard. So we answered those, and we wanted to get a copy of all the conceptual designs.
Yeah.
So that's what you also got to see what those are. So if I don't know if you had any questions on our answers, I'd be glad to respond to those.
So, well,
Okay.
I don't have, not off the top of my head, do I have questions that weren't answered? I think it's worth providing the highlight of some of these responses for, for the minutes, more or less. If I could summarize everything, I'd say the two drivers for cost differences for this being much higher than what we thought were a lower, I think CGR used a lower, more or less, cost of labor, cost of services for the build out, and that in combination with the higher square footage is really the driver of, well, that and inflation, just inflation in general.
I think their square footages were smaller than where we are at today.
Yeah. So square footage is a big story here. And to the degree that this project has to change in order to get to something that, the task is going to be figuring out how we get a project before the public that the public can support.
Well, the square footage was definitely what jumped out at me, especially on the table in the back, because you have the existing square footage. I think I'm reading it correctly. So for company one, it's just over 10,000. So we would be doubling it.
Almost, yeah.
And for company three, even though it would be new, and obviously that's, we know that's too small, but that's almost, it's at least 4 times. So I feel like that's a starting point, because I just feel like, even with the comments for the Board of Ed building and talking about that square footage versus what the existing square footage was, even with that, because as far as I remember, if you included the lower level, which is a disaster, but it's space that's used and needed for storage and electrical and infrastructure, and we were ending up with just a tiny bit bigger than the total square footage of the existing one. Now I understand it's not apples and apples, it's a completely different type of project, and obviously we need more space because of the size of the equipment, and because of the safety measures.
Right.
So I guess my question would be, I know that I feel like that's the starting point for me in terms of
Square footage.
And then I know that there's the community rooms and the training rooms, and, obviously it's, if I were building a house, I would put it all on the list, but I feel like it's still it's just too much.
So, I think where this is.
So how do we get to a point where we can try to see how much we can, can we do community rooms at one of the stations, or?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I think, right. So I think like what's here now is, it's like this is like the optimal solution, right? This is the best. If money were no object, this is the solution we would pick. And I think the task we're going to have is to identify how much, what can the town afford, more or less. And I think I think we have a task in front of us of identifying an allowance of sorts that the building committee will need to take back internally and work with all interested stakeholders, ourselves included, to figure out what priorities fit under that budget.
Yeah, I feel like it's sort of like, we're in budget season, right? So I'm starting to think in that way. And it's like the Board of Ed has to shave off, $1 million. What are they cutting? It's never perfect. The town always ends up cutting some stuff. The Board of Ed cuts stuff. So I feel like there must be something in here that can still go to bring the cost down.
The whole idea behind this is that our next tranche with the architect would be that exact thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So we would look at, what are the priorities, the real priorities, and the value of them.
Yeah.
Do we need all of these things? Can we do without some? We know that the big driver is square feet. You can do the calculation.
Yeah.
I get it, right? I mean, it's pretty easy to understand that. And then we want to get input from the fire department. Okay, what's of value? What do we really have to have, right? What is it that we need? What can we do about maybe changing some areas, maybe moving things out of company one and putting them down in the new company three? That would make maybe that expansion smaller up here. Do we need that large of an expansion at company four? So start asking those questions now.
Yeah.
But it's important that we get the fire department's input to make sure that we're not missing something.
Yeah.
Right, because it is, I think you hit it right. I mean, it's the size of the bays that are the problem. Right now, you don't fit them in. You want to go to a station in a small bays, go up to Norfolk. Firematic support and firefighter safety and
Yeah.
living, right? I hope you understand, we're building these buildings for another 30 to 40 years.
Yes.
Okay, and so they're gonna look large, but in 30 to 40 years, when I'm over at St. Anne Cemetery, somebody will think, well, I'll be there.
40 years, I'll be there too.
I mean, hopefully, someone will say, hey, that was a really great idea, to think about this ahead. So, and the buildings last too, right? Look at company one and company 3, they lasted a long time. You look at company 4, that lasted a long time, because they were built well from the beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So you have to keep all those things in mind. You get what you pay for.
Yes, but you get nothing if we can't, if there's, so much pushback
Well, exactly. I
from,
mean,
like in Bud, if,
I feel like, so I feel like, it's very important to get this right on the first try, because if it's not successful on the first go around, we're going to be fighting negative pressure throughout the project. And the good news is, I think we do have room. We have room in debt service opening up. I think there's, I think we have to. We don't have an option. We have to do something here. It's just identifying how much we can layer on without, without increasing the taxes some unreasonable amount. That's the task that we have to do. So we have some bond modeling to do. And
timeline, how much gets done, do one.
exactly, I think there's going to be
Which one?
different phases.
Yeah.
There are several different, like a series of bonds, most likely. It's a big project, but some of the answers in here kind of highlight, but there's the one about the library. Yeah, like the library was
It actually
originally
would be
completed.
17 million if it was
Yeah.
done today.
Yeah,
And so that's the other part, is people are
for
just,
real.
people are getting used to what inflated prices are now, and we're at the very front edge of that inflation. People aren't used to it. So, we all expected these to be $5, $6, $7 million per building. And we're,
Well.
everybody did, right? We all did going in.
Maybe a little
Well, I
bit.
mean, that's what we have with CGI.
But it was just,
No, and that was a good explanation in terms of, what CGR looked at and how this is, doing a deeper dive and more specific and what the needs are. So, I think, I just, it's scary.
Yeah.
And we want to get it to the point where residents feel comfortable with it and see the need and, want to have it.
So I
So,
mean,
So
you have
that's
to
on
understand, right? I mean, you need to build for the future.
Yeah.
And I think it's not only with this building, look at purchasing the Board of Education building. You're buying that building for the future. You're
absolutely.
not buying it for
And it was
today.
cheaper than
You're buying
building
it for the
from
future.
new.
So you have to invest in these things. There's investments like at home, right? You gotta put a roof on, you gotta paint the house, you gotta invest in the driveway, or the value of your house goes down, right? I mean, so there's certain investment, but smaller investments that we're talking about here, but I mean, you have to invest in your infrastructures.
And I think one thing that Brandon has, that I took away from our conversation about bigger dollar items is that, that idea that bond then gets spread across multiple taxpayers for multiple years, and that it's not just a 1 or a 2 year hit, that a generation or a 10-year period is paying for this. And yeah, I mean, you don't like taking on I don't even want to say a second mortgage or looking to work within your budget to make that project happen, but you do it, right? And I think we're all in agreement with this here as well. But yeah, having a timeline of company 3 goes up first because it's new, and then you get to use those office space while company 1 gets renovated, and that's, but yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot of money to try to just say, go charging ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, again, so I think we need to do the model and figure out what capacity is, for debt. And
And a
then-
priority list in terms of, and
So,
I mean,
yeah,
are they gonna
okay,
be
so that's-
able to like
that's the
correlate a
pieces.
dollar amount to that? Like when you guys are able to
Yeah.
prioritize?
So there's
that you-
another, so there's already a contract, or proposal, I should say, out there from, Tecton. And, it is pretty much exactly that. It's, help the fire building committee, reach out to the stakeholders, come up with priorities. Then there's also a series of workshops.
But
It's not in the packet this year, in this meeting, but we'll put it in the packet for next meeting, and we can discuss whether we think that's the right set of goals in there. I don't think that should move too far before we have the modeling done, but I think there are definitely things that can happen in parallel.
Correct. I would think so.
And excuse me for not asking this earlier, are we bound by contract to have Tecton build?
No.
Or they are just designers?
They are just architects for this
Yeah.
first portion.
Okay.
And we're not even
Bound to them
obligated
for-
to have them do the second portion. I mean, we could go out and get a
We
different.
Because
fulfill,
it's specs, I mean, obviously the specs for the actual buildings, and that's going to require much more engineering and much more detailed.
more-
Right.
I think that'll require probably going out to bid again, right, for
Um,
architects, I would imagine?
we could, if we
Yeah.
wanted to. So right now, Tecton has fulfilled the contract that was awarded
Right.
last year. I think it was $175,000. So this, what they've proposed would be an extension of the contract.
Yeah.
If we decide, and their original proposal was just for conceptual design. The RFP was left at a point where if we were pleased with their work and wanted to keep them on for the next, like the more detailed design phase, we could negotiate an agreement, but we are fully within our rights to go out to bid and do it again.
Yeah, because I mean, we've all seen the bid sheets that come through us, and you have those companies that shoot the moon, and then those that come in maybe unqualifiedly low, right? But,
This would be an RFP. So this would be a qualifications-based selection. So it wouldn't be based on price. It would be
Okay.
based off of qualifications and interview process and then a negotiated agreement. You're thinking of once we have a design, you have
Yeah.
a budget or an
yeah,
appropriation.
am I too far ahead in this
You're
process?
thinking about construction, I think.
Yeah,
So
okay,
that would be a public bid where, well, depending on which model we use, but it could be a public bid with an opening.
Okay.
Lowest.
Sorry for
responsible.
misunderstanding the process there. I mean, can we look on this as Rosalie and say that this might be an overshot of an estimate?
No, I.
Do you think this
Square
is,
footage is driving it, period.
yeah,
And I think it's the way that we developed what we needed.
right,
We charged the committee to tell you what the fire department needed for new stations.
Yeah.
That's what the charge was.
Yeah.
And so we met the charge of that for the committee.
Yep.
This is what we received. I feel it's good. I feel the estimators, they went back to the estimators and they could probably get about $1 million out of the whole project. Just right.
I saw that figure, it was
Yeah.
like 900,000.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean,
Yeah.
that's not gonna solve the problem.
Right.
So, I think we would like to do the follow-on with them. They know us, they know the process, they know where we are. To me, it only makes sense to stay with the same architect along the way to go to the next thing. Now, as we go out and bid and start building buildings and get a referendum, have money, that's a whole different ballgame.
And I will say, Anthony, in talking with Tecton about what might come next, depending on what the council decides to task the building committee with, one of the things we did talk about was if we have a second conceptual design based off of whatever parameters the council gives to the building committee, we use a different cost estimator. So that way we'll have the original cost estimates with all the backup, all the unit pricing, and whoever this other cost estimator is, so you can kind of check, and if they're in the same ballpark in terms of unit pricing, you know, the first guy was on. You know, and also keeping in mind that at this stage, based on the level of design that was done, there are a lot of what ifs, a lot of, you know, best guesses, you know.
Right.
And there's a lot of contingencies that go on the bottom dollar, because we just don't know. So keep that in mind. The number gets clearer the closer you get to final design.
I have a question. Let me ask this retroactive question first. When did the committee first get together to start creating this master plan?
When the town council charged us.
I think
Yeah, do you remember?
Right
June
after.
of 2023.
Yeah.
Okay.
June of 23.
All right.
That's right.
So, and I'm just,
Fall of 23?
No, it was,
Yeah.
I think it was June.
okay. And I'm just wondering, so with your last statement, are you saying that even though the total amount that this ended up initially, now that they came up with, 65 million or 66 million, is it still good that they went through that process? Or do you think when it's such a large project, because I'm worried about the committee members' time and even the managing expectations, is there any way to do this type of project, and we can even use use this for future projects that aren't fire department, but to give some kind of dollar maximum or something where we're not so way off that we have to almost start all over
Yeah,
to
I
adjust
think
it?
this is the basis for the project. Saying we're way off, I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
I think these are the buildings that the fire department feels for firefighter safety, for apparatus bay room, and everything for today's firefighter. This is
Yeah,
what-
I just meant the
this is
dollar
what you
amount.
would need.
Right.
So, but
Yeah.
it's all about the square footage. It's $1,000 a square foot for a building today. $1,000 compared to 5 years ago where maybe it was 700. I'm just, things have gotten expensive.
Yeah.
Things have gotten expensive. And I didn't want to cap the team with, so early in the process, with saying, well, we can only spend $10,000 or whatever, $10 million, because that would have stifled the entire thing of what was important.
Okay.
It was important for the team to really understand and try to get something that'd be good for the town 30 years from now.
Now, how is the fire department feeling about now that this was presented and it ended up being so expensive and that it it has to be cut back? Or how are they feeling about that?
Well, I think at $65 million, I think the logical people at the fire department understand that's a lot of money. You know, I think in general, everyone understands that. It's a lot of money. And now I think if we can do the debt study and we can show this is how much money we have in the piggy bank over time. And this is where, if you were to put a line on there for 65 million, this is how high your debt would get, and this is what the taxes would need to be for 65 million. I think that would be pretty
Well,
understandable.
also, I mean, all of this grew out of the study, which was really important, and it gave a lot of insight into especially recruitment needs and safety needs, and it wasn't all just about the buildings, and that's also incorporated into these plans, which is
Well, I mean, we had
really
two
important.
different studies, right? We had CGR,
Right.
which talked about the fire department in general.
Right.
With everything. And then this was only for the building.
Right, but I'm saying that, like, obviously, when you start to list the things, that if you want to have community rooms and exercise, like, there are things there that addressed, the original study, which is important. So I'm not saying that we want to get rid of all those things and just focus on buildings and cut it down. I feel like the committee has worked really hard and has put a ton of work in this, and you're right. Like, I think they've taken their time, or maybe not taken their time, but it has taken the time that it has to get to this point. And it was really well done. So I feel like I'm always just like coming across like, it's too expensive, we gotta, you know what I mean? And it's like, I appreciate the work and I appreciate the need, and I, you know, that's the worst thing ever is when you have to sit there and start scaling back, right? So,
Well, there's just a lot of different,
yeah.
there's a lot of parameters to this too.
But I
right?
guess
It's
my
not
question
just-
is, why was CGR's price per square foot so different?
So far off.
Yeah,
Because I think one of the things that was mentioned in the thing was they use some very low pricing for labor. Right, the cost per unit, you know, for public safety prevailing wages and constructions in the state of Connecticut. There's a certain prevailing wage you have to pay people, right, when you build things.
Rochester pricing,
Not that, but
Rochester versus,
I mean,
they were
it's,
from
you know,
Rochester. Yeah.
the state of Connecticut, I believe, is very high in prevailing.
Just like
wage compared
3
to other
times.
places. Yeah.
But it was
so
my
I think that's why there's like the disconnect.
But I think the CGR study was looking at like who is employed by not employed, but who works for the fire department? What do the buildings currently look at? And what would it cost to replace the buildings, walls, the bays, because they were so tight, is my understanding. Not if you could have what the fire department needs, that would be a totally different picture, which is what this study was.
Which is what happened here, right?
Yes.
There, correct. I would agree with you on that.
And I think the focus of the CGR study was mostly on the buildings was this much of the study.
Right.
Right, so, you know, it was done by a subcontractor to CGR, so they had a very small
Right, I can
portion of the
see
pie.
that saying that like the
Work effort.
buildings were smaller or less amount of square footage, but the price per square foot was so off, and that's where I get hung up.
I have a question. How did Canton, if I notice on the list with Canton, it says not prevailing wage. How did that,
Yeah,
That's a question for them.
yeah, I mean,
okey dokey.
Very good question.
yeah, they maybe there is some,
I wouldn't
maybe it
recommend
depends
it.
on the type of
I can't
building.
even-
No,
I can't even have an answer to that because I don't understand it.
Unless they had people in the town literally helping them.
You might also notice they terminated their architect.
Halfway through.
Okay.
So
prevailing
I
wage
don't-
is just based off of the price, like the value of the project. So it's new construction versus renovation. I think new construction is $1 million. So if a project costs more than $1 million, you have to pay prevailing wage for the Department of Labor.
I don't think Canton's process or end result is anything that we want to emulate.
That's
not
what I've
what we're shooting
heard
for here.
repeatedly, yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going back again to the square footage because of the additional precedent comparisons, even the adjusted escalated cost for what they did in Lexington and in Bloomfield is, you know, $795 and $890 per square foot. So,
But that was back, you know, so yeah. so
but it's adjusted. So I'm assuming they're giving us you know, that's like adjusting the library cost. So that's where I just keep getting sort of tripped up.
So I mean, that it really says for Lexington Mass Station, if you adjusted it to October 2026, that would be $795 a square foot.
Right, while ours would be $1,065.
Right.
For company 3.
Yep, and that's more of a, right on the time. When you escalate things, you don't always catch everything either when you're trying to escalate far out, right? So,
Right, but it's just, since it's them, I guess that's a question I have going back, is why, you know, what's the discrepancy there? I get that it's adjusted and, you know, there's gonna be some things, but still, like, if we could get it from 1,000 down to 800, that would make or 900, you know, that would make a big
But you're
impact.
saying prevailing wage is just kind of set by,
No matter what we build, we're gonna be subject to prevailing wage.
Right.
If it's
It's
over
just-
$1 million.
it just varies by state or.
Yeah, it varies by state. Their state prevailing wage rates. I don't think prevailing wage is what's driving these. It could be what's in the building, it could be the site conditions, it could be how much, you know,
Right.
the size of the parking lot, it could be, you know, there could be a variety of, that's why it's hard to make these comparisons.
But that's
cross
why I feel like, I
projects.
guess I'm saying it in the hopes that maybe we can shave off $100 per square foot
Maybe we can with the finishes.
with
of
the
building,
finishes or
or
whatever,
something like
right?
that. I mean, there's all, and that's what we want to get at.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, that's, this next thing is what we want to really get at.
I think when it does come time for the referendum on this, based on what we just went through with the Board of Ed building, I think the pictures of Board of Ed building it was everything. People were talking about it outside in the line to come into the building. That is what sold people on voting for the Board of Ed
Get your
building.
nasty pictures of your
Yeah.
And the CGR
fire
pictures,
stations, yeah.
the CGR pictures show something, but actually going to the station, and I mentioned this to Bruce, open up the station 1, 2, 3 times, like before the referendum, and let the people come and see.
And try to walk behind the truck.
There is no room for trucks. There is no place for decontamination of the uniforms. It is dangerous to your health. People need to see that. I don't think that they see that in CGR studies, in the notes that we have, in our minutes, in what we say, and what we say to them when we're standing on the sidewalk with them. I think people will understand if they see with their own eyes, either through pictures or a visit, what you guys have. Because
And
it's
part of the
it's
next tranche of this
insufficient.
architect is we would like to go public with what we've been doing as a building committee.
Mhm.
So we'd like to have a public open forum sometime to be able to discuss and show what we've been looking at and what the problems are and why new fire stations are needed.
Yeah.
Particularly the
Fire
safety
stations and
aspect.
renovations are needed.
I mean, a lot of
Way in
people,
advance of the referendum. You know,
Right.
Forget the referendum.
I agree.
Let's do it before that.
A lot of people kept saying, why was the Board of Ed building sitting like this for so long? Like, I've been on the town council, and from the moment I've been on, we've been talking about the Board of Ed building. And the same with the fire station. I don't think people see that you guys have been working on this since the summer of 2023, and even before that with the CGR study. So it's not like it's just been sitting there to rot with nobody doing anything. And unless you put it on your Facebook page or opened up to people, even though this is open and they can all come and read our minutes, you know,
They don't.
they don't, and they don't see that you guys have been working so hard on this and that it's a problem.
Yeah, so that's one of the ideas is part of this next tranche, like I said, we want to go public. We want to not just talk to the neighbors around the stations like we have, but really open it to the public for a few nights. Give them a couple choices, have them come, talk to them about what we found. You know, by that time, we'll have an idea of the affordabilities and what we need to do. We'll have some other conceptual plans we can share. And maybe that's a good idea. We open up a fire station. We have it in the fire station. And we take the people on a tour of the fire stations.
Maybe they'll donate you some new couches in the meantime.
Just make sure to point out where the trucks have hit and how you can't squeeze
And
by
The
anything.
uniforms are in the hallway.
I have a question. I'm just going back to the prevailing wage thing. Can we find out, is it based on whether the company is from Connecticut versus?
No, if you are a municipality doing a project, a construction project that meets the definition of construction, if it's a renovation over, I think it's $400,000, you're subject to prevailing wage. If it's a new construction project at or over $1 million, you are subject to prevailing wage.
Okay.
A lot of companies that are union shops, meaning their employees are part of some type of labor union, they already pay prevailing wage as of right. It's just part of what the employee is paid. But the state of Connecticut requires municipal projects of that value to be prevailing wage. So it's just,
Those rates are constantly updated.
Yeah.
So before you're locking in a contract, before you're going out to bid, you have to get those rates from the Department of Labor. And that's where, sometimes you hear these things about communities not complying, again, with a renovation cost of, I think you're at 400,000, new construction of $1 million. It's illegal. I mean, you have to comply. And that's something that, if the Department of Labor gets wind of that, they will investigate. So you don't want to be on the wrong side of that. It has to be done.
So what are we looking for tonight? Are we looking for?
Tonight, just
a-
getting answers to your questions, and then next meeting, which is just a couple of weeks, we'll have the contract for the extension of Tecton's work. We can review that, make sure it addresses the things we want. We'll vote on that then. And meanwhile, we'll start the debt modeling also.
Yeah, what I'd like to do is have an initial discussion with Matt Spurndle, who's our financial advisor. And if it's okay, I think maybe getting Jim involved in some of those discussions, just to kind of think out, how we might time this and how we might phase it.
Yep.
Getting him involved in that portion of the discussion. And yeah, I don't know how far we can get in a month, because in the meantime, we're also trying to crank out a budget.
Yeah.
No, I'm not
There's that.
expecting the debt modeling to be
Yeah.
ready.
We'll at least get it started. Yep.
So I have a question with regards to that. Is there a way to include any potential other big
Yeah,
projects, like
Oh, we
a
would.
middle school
Yes.
or anything
Well,
else
the
that
way
might be coming down the pike?
Yes, the way that we'll do it is you basically take the existing debt that is approved, well, the debt that's been issued and the debt that's been approved but not issued. Like, take everything that's out there right now, and then we're gonna make assumptions about timing and amounts for future projects. So we're gonna take Old Farms Road, the east-west section, make an assumption about the amount and timing of that project. I forget what else is out there right now. The middle school, I don't know if we want to get into that.
No,
because
yeah.
That's one of those projects that if that were to happen, then that blows up the model. Because that's like
my worry.
$150 million or something. I mean, so, there haven't been enough discussions about it where I could even begin to assign an amount or time to that.
But if in
Good
10 years, something needs to be done.
Yeah,
Like
but you'll have a sense from, this is gonna be, I think this is gonna be debt modeling of certain levels of, so what if we say that 20 million for the for 10 years is the first phase that we
Right.
wanna look at. Then you can get a sense from that, how much that adds on. And, you double that for maybe what the middle school would add on the first,
The whole key to this is just giving you context.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a copy, or I'll send it to you just as a reminder. We'll use the template that we used back in the spring of '23 as an example. And that's where, we were planning on, replacement facility for the Board of Education and, the first phase of Old Farms Road. And, we just kind of made some pretty good assumptions in the end and just layered them on top of the other. Amount
Yeah, I remember.
issued and when we think that issuance would occur.
Yep.
So pretty straightforward exercise.
Remember, this is the first project for the fire department since 1970.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, look
Thank
forward to
you.
the meeting in February.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for your time.
You too, Jamie.
Prevailing wages, you think about it, this is why a lot of kids are not going into the trades rather than college, because they're making, I was just researching it, $53 to $90 an hour
It's good money.
for
Well,
a licensed electrician.
The example from years ago was Simsbury, when prevailing wage became a Connecticut law. They built a firehouse, and then they wanted to build the same one identical to it, and it cost about twice as much, just because of that law.
Right. And just the minimum wages of today have increased so much, so everything else, all the other wages, except for ours, right?
All right. Let's see, town council budget work session schedule. We have a February 8th proposed date, 8 to 1 p.m. It's right around the corner. It's always a fun day. There'll be pizza.
I'll bring
and salads
donuts.
And fun discussions and
It's gonna be a
coffee.
fun
Oh, yeah, you gotta have
It's a party.
donuts, munchkins.
Love it.
Yeah, right around the corner. Do we need,
I-
do we need to approve, do we need to vote to approve this? or
Yes,
just-
please.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just a question, but it's not about the times or the dates, or, so do I do that now, or do you want to vote on this first? But it's related to this.
Go ahead.
Let's go do that before we vote.
I just wanted to ask if, since this came up in 2023 and numerous times in 2024, and during the process of preparing the town portion of the budget, is there any way we could try to transition into looking at what, at the end of the year, we've been doing budgetary transfers, and just look at, is there consistently something that we're always spending a certain amount on? Like, when I was reviewing the minutes from last meeting, I noticed it was stated 1.7 million per year is needed to keep up with the paving management. So is there any way we can add that into the budget, but at the same time calculate what we've been accruing for in interest income from July 1st until either January or February, just to get a feel for how's our interest income looking, and just put both of those in the budget instead of just postponing it till the fall and basically virtually doing the same thing after the budget process.
I'm confused. So so what happens in the fall is a result of the budget that you're in now. So whenever you do the council and board of finance year-end transactions that are done in like November, December, those are all a result of the immediately prior fiscal year. So the fiscal year that we're in, that ends June 30th, 2025. So what we're budgeting for now is the fiscal year that goes from July 1, 25 until June 30, 2006. So the issue with that is I will make a recommendation about not just interest income, but all of the non-tax revenues, grants, everything. And then we'll have to see ultimately how those play out over the course of the next fiscal year when they're implemented. And we will then learn the results of that process at the end of fiscal year 26, so that in the fall of 26, we will be acting on whatever the results were. If the interest rates run hot and, we have more revenue than we budgeted for, well, then that's where we have all those decisions at the end of the fiscal year to make. That can include putting assignments on fund balance or closing it to fund balance or doing it whatever. But that's how the cycle runs through. So does that help? I'm not sure.
I guess I would think, as we're earning interest, why can't we use it?
Because we're in the middle of a fiscal year.
Right, so then instead of using it during this year, we incorporate it into what we're working on for this budget, which is next year's budget. So I just think there must be a way to transition into handling it that way.
Are you speaking just directly about the interest?
Well, it's not just the interest income, it's the repeated, kind of consistent good use. I mean, we do have to pave roads, et cetera.
I mean, isn't it like,
That's only for the last couple.
if we put into the budget an expected amount of income, interest income, and we are careful not to overestimate that, And if we get more money, then it gets appropriated and moved in, say, $1 million towards pavement management that we then don't have to put into the next budget.
Yeah.
We don't have to put, we have to put 700,000 in then.
Well,
So,
but
I think to answer your question, Margaret, I can't, if you take, take a, I don't know, a running projection, right? If we take the first 6 months of the current fiscal year and we projected in the budget, our revenue would be 1 million and instead we have 2 million. Just at that line item for interest income, I can't, the boards can't turn around and say, oh, we have one line item in, a 50 line item revenue budget where we have an additional $1 million, let's spend it. I can't do that.
But it's over the past few years though, since they were it seemed to be underestimated a little more than usual. That's why, and then would the solution be, let's not
No, the solution is,
let's not overestimate it this year.
the solution is with these boards,
but then you
to
can come up
say-
short.
well, I mean, this is misunderstood significantly. And here's the downside to that. These rates are very high right now.
Yeah.
And if you look at, and I handed it out before, you can go back 4 years, you can go back 5 years. There are years where we were making $300,000 on our pooled cash. Now, because of where the rates are, because of what the Fed is doing to try to tame inflation, that jumps up to $3.5 million. The Fed doesn't care about the town of Avon's budget or the timing, how any of that works. So there's no correlation between when those interest rates bump up and when we have to set budgets for revenue estimates. So as a result of that, we have more revenue coming in than we anticipated. Those rates will drop. The rates will drop. There was a long article in the Wall Street Journal about that today. And as soon as inflation starts getting back below 2%, the rates are going to come down. And there is going to be a real problem if, while the rates were hot, we have budgeted too aggressively for interest income. Because if, we're back in a $500,000 environment and we've been budgeting, an additional $2 million, I mean, that's getting close to $1 million that you're then going to either have to cut your way out of, or you're going to have to raise taxes to make up for, because you can't cut expenditures that much. It's just not there, or it's going to lead to very difficult expenditure reduction decisions.
But right now, we're 6 months, we'll be 7 months into earning interest income.
Yeah.
So we don't have to guess about those 7 months.
Right.
So it seems like less of a gamble when we're doing this in January, trying to come up with a number.
But it's for the previous year.
But
Like what
that's-
we're earning now is in the budget set at whatever amount. And we're either gonna come in above that or below that.
But like right now, what have we accrued between July 1st and by the time we finish this, it might be end of January versus what we budgeted?
Okay, so say
We
it's
should
more.
see-
So then what do you want to do with it?
If we've acquired more interest income than expected, then at least it's not a gamble for the next year. We've got that. I just feel like we're
What do you mean by a gamble for the next year?
it's because you're saying interest rates might drop. So, but right now, between July and January, they haven't.
Right.
So that's what I mean.
Okay.
I mean, we can,
Yeah, I don't.
we
We don't know
can,
what's
we
gonna
can
happen
raise
from
projected revenue to the
future
point
July
where we don't raise
the
taxes at
next
all
July.
next year, but then the year after that, it's gonna be a disaster. I mean, it's, it's responsible budgeting, just because, so for the first 6 months of the year, we know maybe interest rates are higher. There's still 6 months left of the year. We've already increased the projections. The projections did increase higher than I think we've ever projected before last year in an effort to get budget down from last year. That's the gamble part of it, is you don't want to raise the projections too high, or you're just going to put yourself in a terrible spot.
I mean, I think what you'll see is, so my job at this point is to recommend a revenue and expenditure budget to the council. I think what you're going to see is that one of my recommendations is going to be to increase interest income revenue projections even beyond where they are in the current year, which I'm not entirely comfortable about, but I don't know what choice there is when you look at these other pressures we have in grand list growth and some other things. So that's the revenue projection that, depending on what's ultimately done with it, will get amended in some fashion in the budget that's adopted, that then has to see us through the fiscal year that begins on July 1st of 25 and doesn't end until June 30th of 26.
Brandon, as a matter of just philosophy, when you're looking at that earned interest income, and when all of the financial experts that we have look at that, yourself, Tom, do you feel that you're in a position right now where you're uncomfortable with the number that you have, or that when you and Tom are looking at that, are you uncomfortable with the amount of earned interest income that you are putting into the budget, or do you feel confident in that? Or would you be more confident if it was less than? And my reason for asking that question is because volatility is the name of the game right now. And I would absolutely hate to go back to the town of Avon midway through a budget year or towards the end of the budget year and say, hey, guess what? We overestimated and now we come up short and now we need to come back and ask for more money. Mm-hmm. That is something that would, if the pitchforks came out, that's what they would come out for, because we have come back for them for more money. So I appreciate a conservative approach to it, because any earned interest income, in addition to what we have budgeted, gets rolled right back into town projects that would have been rolled forward to the next budget year. Am I correct with that?
Right.
So my question is, are you uncomfortable with that number, or would you be more comfortable if it was lower?
Define comfortable or uncomfortable. I mean, I recognize that people look at it and it's like it's free money, and we got it last year, and I mean, look, the philosophy we have always had in Avon from day one has been budget your revenues conservatively, yes. Budget your interest income conservatively, budget your intergovernmental revenues conservatively, because you just don't know.
Yes.
Right? And I've seen over the years where we have leaned forward on intergovernmental revenues and then they've disappeared. And I think this is a prime example because it's such an outlier. Yeah. Because I only have to look back 5 years and interest income was $350,000. And now I've got a spike that goes up to $3.5 million. Now, you tell me what happens if we estimate a $3.5 million revenue, and then within 5 years, we're back down to 500,000. What do you do? Where do you go?
Raise taxes.
You raise taxes, you cut expenditures, there's nowhere to go. That's not my problem. I'm going to tell these boards what the problem is going into it. I don't quite understand why this math isn't understood, but you're going to have a hell of a time backing out of it at the end of the day.
But I don't think it has to be 3.5.
Well, it'll be something. I already said I'm going to increase it beyond what is in the current year budget. So I'm probably going to increase it another $750,000. No, I'm not crazy about doing that.
What does that bring up to?
I'm really trying hard to understand, Margaret. So maybe.
Well, let me just understand. So what would that bring the interest income?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I don't have the budget in front of me. This is all what I'm doing now.
I'm trying to understand why you think it's a bad idea and why people are saying it's stupid in the audience. If you could explain that to me. Like, I'm trying to understand, because the budget book is this big and I'm trying to understand things, and I always end up trying to relate it to like my own, my own like household budget in a very small way and say, if I have the money to pay for something, then I could plan to pay for it if it's a repair or something on my house. Now, if all of a sudden my husband got a big bonus, then that's something that maybe I wouldn't have to take a loan out for the next year if I, had to replace the furnace and I have the money to pay for it. But that's very, that's obviously very simplified. So I'm trying to understand, because you're right, this has come up over and over again. So I'm trying to understand, is it that you feel that somehow the town has money that we're not, I am trying to understand what the issue is, I guess, if you could explain it to me.
I'm not sure how I could make you feel comfortable about my question.
It's the same idea. It's the same idea. Forget about interest income. A major issue we're going to be dealing with now is, use of unassigned fund balance, right? So last year we used unassigned fund balance in part to reduce the impact on the tax levy because we had the issues with the implementation of the revaluation and,
Right.
all of that. So that was, I think, $1.2 million. That is a one-time use of that revenue that leaves us in a divot as we start out our budgeting for this year. So whenever we look at the calculations for how the budget is going to evolve with the new spending, we start off with being 1.25 in the hole. We have to make that up right out of the gate. And that requires, again.
But wasn't some of the interest income going to be used to repay that?
No,
Not this time, this year.
I mean, it gets paid, you can try to make up for it going forward, which is in part what we're doing by increasing the interest income revenue. It's a general revenue. So like one chart I can put together for you is to show you, like if you have a revaluation that's negative, right? This is the exact same thing. You have to adjust the mill rate at the first step to make up for the difference.
Right.
We're doing the same thing by having to adjust the mill rate or cut spending to make up for the use of the 1.25 million that's no longer baked into the tax levy. So all of these one-time revenues create cliffs. And when you get something like interest income, again, that you look at, like you don't set your investment portfolio based on what it did over the last 2 years. You treat it like an actuary. You try to have some historical look back and smoothing to inform what you do going forward, because you recognize, a 3 or 4 year series of high or low returns isn't sound strategy going forward. So, I mean, at any rate, I think it's pretty straightforward. My job at this point is to make a recommendation that will include not only the expenditures, but the revenues, and I guess we can talk about it more at the workshop.
Yeah, and in the February meeting, by then you'll know what that interest income number, what you increased it to.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when the new president takes office, and if the world changes drastically, do you have the ability to change your idea about the outlook of interest income and
Well, yeah, but only until.
It's
a certain point?
Until the
Yeah, at a
referendum.
certain
Well, we
point,
have
it
to
has to
approve
get
it.
locked in. And see,
Yeah.
that's the issue with these budgets, right? Either on the revenue side where, think about the time that's involved. Here we are, we're sitting here in, January of 25. By, say, March or whatever, April, we've got to finalize a revenue estimate for something as volatile as interest income for a period that will run from July 1st of 25 until June 30th of 26. If I could do that, I wouldn't be sitting here. And it's the same thing on the expenditure side. I mean, Bridget does it all the time. But, like some of these projections we're trying to make are based on all kinds of variables that are going all over the place, like weather. And that's where, whenever you think about how you budget for something like, DPW over time, you don't just take last year, you don't take the last 2 years or the last 3 years, you try to take a 5 to 10 year set to make sure you've got a good representative sample that you're basing your next year off of.
I'll wait till the February. Then we'll know the
What else I
number.
can
We'll
say?
know the number.
Okay.
Should we vote on
All
that?
right, anything else on this? We don't have any approval needed on this.
Yes, you do have to approve
Okay,
it.
we do. Okay. I'll take a motion to approve the session schedule for the February 8th budget meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, let's see, so we have the appointment for the Recreation and Parks Committee. I'll take a motion to table that.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I know, so our next item is a resolution for the former state senator Lisa Seminara. I know Lisa wanted to be here, but is sick. We'll go ahead and table. I'll take a motion to table this in order to hopefully allow for her to come in and
So moved.
see the resolution in person. Margaret made the motion. Do I have a second for the table?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 24, 25, 37. We have the collective bargaining agreement between the Board of Ed and the teachers. So this is a 3-year contract. 20, so this is, I guess, retroactive back to, I'm sorry, no, this is for July 25 through June 2028. You have the contract in front of you. This is, I believe we have several. Deb's here. We also have Jess Giannini here to
Hi.
walk us through.
Oh, sorry, Susan, I'm here. I'm trying to share for you. I'll have that up in a second.
Okay.
Blow your ears off. So are these the same? They're just
There
color?
was a small update to the color one is more recent, and the memo dated today is
Gotcha.
more recent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Grace, it's not allowing me to share the PowerPoint for some reason. Are you
Okay.
able? Let me try to PDF it. It's only allowing me to share Chrome tabs on my computer.
Okay.
Can I email it to you?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that.
Worries. Education is Google Suites.
Yeah, we always have issues between, yeah, so let's see.
State score.
Yeah.
Okay, I am in receipt of the email.
0 to 0.
Okay,
Okay.
I think. There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
All right, Susan, were you going to walk us through this?
Yes, thank you. And thank you to the council and for Brandon to allowing me to present virtually. As you can hear, I'm a little under the weather. So first off, the board and the district would like to thank the Board of Finance for having a rep go through the process with us. Thank you to Kathleen Johnson, who was part of our negotiations committee and was able to observe the process and gave us some input along the way. So we thank her. Next slide, Grace. First thing I want to go over is for those of you who haven't been part of a teacher's contract collective bargaining process before, there's some guidelines set out by the state. The Teacher Negotiations Act requires us, the board, to act in good faith in negotiating. They give us very strict timelines that we have to follow. And during our negotiation process, we have to consider a lot of factors when we put forward our offers to the union, including statewide average settlements during the current time that we're bargaining, the town's ability to pay, and we have to put forward a reasonable wage proposal. And what that means is, regardless of what we may want to do or what the town may want us to do in terms of a wage proposal, going in at a 0% or anything significantly under what the prevailing state settlements would not be considered in good faith. And if we aren't able to go through the next slide 3, please, Grace. If during the negotiation process we're unable to come to an agreement with the union, the town and the Board of Ed are forced into what's called an arbitration process by a certain date. And that during that process, the third-party panel considers a number of factors, what prior negotiations between the Board of Ed and the union have been, the interest and welfare of their group, cost of living changes over the past 3 years, and the consumer price index just this last year alone, it was 3.5%, existing conditions for groups or similar groups, and then the state prevailing wages. So it's not the same wages you just had a long discussion about, but instead it's the statewide settlements or the prevailing wage for the teachers taken into account there. On slide 4, just to give you an idea of the tight timeline the Board of Ed is under, we started negotiations on July 16th. We had to come to an agreement or head to mediation by September 16th and have a final agreement no later than September 20th, or we would face arbitration. I also would input that the arbitration process can cost upwards of over $100,000. That would be an unbudgeted expense for the Board of Ed if we weren't able to reach that settlement. Whenever we walk into a process similar to when the town negotiates with their unions, we have goals, and our goals are to address various language issues that we discuss with the union or with our staff, our teachers, our administrators. We work very collaboratively with our teachers union all throughout the year. Mr. Giannini, Dr. Colonel Mullen, myself, Mr. Medic meet with them monthly, discuss the status of the world, and we talk about things. We're able to work those things out before we get to the negotiating table. And we also are very cognizant during the entire process of the fiscal ramifications that this contract has to the town's budget. And we always try to come in at the lowest rate in the state in terms of a settlement or close to the lowest rate. On slide 6, you can see the data that we walked into. We had our bargaining unit data. Once we start the process is from a point in time. That point in time was the day before we began the negotiation process. So on July 15th, we had 283.3 FTEs of teachers. We had a certified payroll of a little over $30 million with a current salary wage of $64,000 on our lowest step, all the way up to $118,000 on our higher step. You can see that we had a large number of those staff members, over 200 on either the master's max step or the 6-year max step. On slide 7, you'll see the settlement with the union. We had a 3-year settlement. What's not on here, and I've given you the gross wage increase and step, what that percentage is, because that's what's reported, and that's what you'll see in all the data. But the gross wage increase, or just the GWI step increase, was 3% each of the years. The difference between the 3% and saying year one, that 4.28%, is the step cost. So how much the teacher's moving along that step ladder, what the impact to the settlement is. You'll see our total agreement was worth 11.77%, or given the employees we had as of July 15th and the steps they were on as of July 15th, would equate to $3.7 million over the 3-year contract. On step 8, we have the highlights of insurance. We were able to negotiate a 1% increase in the employee contribution, which equates to a 1% decrease in the board's contribution, starting in year 1 for the entirety of the contract. Just for some reference, Avon is among the highest in terms of employee contributions percentage in the state. So if you look at comparisons, we are one of the higher ones. Not many have rates at 21% for employees to contribute. In addition, one of the things we negotiated in the prior contract was reducing the high deductible, or the HSA contribution, from 50% to 40%, which was a significant savings to the board in the town. And almost no one, when you look at comparisons in the state, has that either. So we are in a very good position on the town financial side for the HSA contribution, as well as that employee share. On slide 9, you'll see how we compare to those statewide settlements. So each of the years, you can see we were under the average settlement. The statewide settlement as of today, and thank you for looking at the updated information. We want to have most up to date for you. The statewide average was 13.45% for 3 years. We came in at 11.77%. In each of the 3 years, we were under what the average was. On slide 10, the settlement data is 5 or 6 pages long. So I thought it relevant showing you the settlements of districts either around us or in similar DERGs or financial situations that Avon is in. And you can see there's only one unknown Hartford district that rounded right near us. Everyone else is significantly higher. And page 11 gives you the contract settlement history in Avon, and you can see throughout the years we've been on the lower side. This is one of the higher ones you would see on this, but given where the state was in walking into the season, as they call it, we are one of the earliest dates in the contract year for the state. The year prior, contract year 23-24, data had to be taken into consideration as well, given that that was the most recent data when we walked into the process. That was still at 12.61%. So you can see last year was at 12.61. This year's right now at 13.45%, and we came in at 11.77. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a quick question about the settlement averages. So do contracts, is it statewide that all the contracts get renegotiated at the same time, or is it staggered? Like, how do the averages, is that how the averages come to be?
Correct. So it all depends on when the budget is. So when your contract's due, there's a certain timeline the state determines. Every year we have to tell them what the town's budget timeline is. So since we have to give, the Board of Ed has to provide our budget to the town by that first Friday in February, it puts the town of Avon in the earliest cycle of the contract because our budget is done, our cycle is so early as comparative to a lot of other towns.
Okay. I have a question about the general wage increase. So the AEA 4.28, 3.87, 3.62, you're saying that 3% of each of those is the general wage increase. So, and it's not 3.1? Because if it's on the 2 pages later, it's saying general wage increase for 3 years is 9.2.
That was 9.2 was the prior year. Margaret, that was a prior settlement contract.
Well, for 22 through 25? Oh, okay, yeah, I'm forgetting it's already 2025.
Right, and it's the total wage increase is the 4.28. What I'm saying when we're talking about a GWI versus a step, there's the cost of just the flat salary increase, which is 3%, and then there's the cost of those folks moving up and down steps or across steps based on their degree. That's what gets you from the 3% each of those years to the higher percentage. And you can see those percentages or the cost goes down because if we keep the same number of employees, they're moving higher up the ladder or to max step, and therefore there would be no step cost. And since we have number of employees already at the highest step, we have one of the lower step costs in the state. Okay, so on that chart 2 pages later for 25 through 28 or whatever that other year is, I think it would show a 9.0 basically for the GWI. If it were only GWI, but again, it's reported as the total percentage cost. Oh, because this is saying total GWI increase. It's not saying total salaries, GWI plus step, yes. But it's not saying that in the chart 2 pages later. It's saying total GWI increase. So I guess that's confused. Well, our contract we're discussing, Margaret, isn't on that chart on slide 11. Right. I'm saying if and when we're adding, yes, that would be 9%. Yes. Okay, so that is just for GWI. Okay. Yes. All right.
So across the other towns, and maybe you already answered this, how does our GWI by itself compare?
It is very on target with the rest of it. So the settlement data we get doesn't always give us all of that information. It gives us the total percentages that I'm reporting to you. So it doesn't delineate always for us that GWI. But given what those percentages are at, we are in line, knowing that we are one of the lower step cost. Some of the other towns and districts have much higher step costs, but if I'm looking at the ones that did report GWI to schedule, they are all in the 3 to 3.5 percentage points. A few in the lower two, a few in the high twos, but they have a much higher step cost than us.
And I mean, clearly they settled, but how do the teachers feel about this?
They were very supportive of it, very collaborative with us. A lot of what they wanted wasn't necessarily financial. There was a lot of language items that we went through with them, the collaborative effort that the teaching and learning team and our team have. They also know that they're one of the higher, if not the highest paid at least in Hartford County. They're very aware of that. They were very big supporters during the budget process, and you saw them at many of the hearings. The union was very supportive. They're aware of what the town's budgetary troubles were last year. And they really worked with us to get to a fair settlement.
I have a few questions that, they don't have to be long answers. I just want to be reminded because I was the board finance rep quite a few years ago and I'm forgetting some of the rules. And I know there's some things you can't say and some things you can, so just bear with me. In these negotiations, in the back and forth, does it ever come up that the salaries are already higher? So if we're comparing percentage increases, it's kind of not apples to apples, where you could have a lower percentage increase and still have a higher dollar amount increase of your salary compared to other towns that might be in the lower ranges for their salaries. Does that ever come up in the general conversation?
It absolutely does, but I will tell you when we get to mediation arbitration, that absolutely does not matter. So it comes up, but it does not factor at all into a mediation arbitration process in terms of the third parties.
Okay, and then in the, under the arbitration process, that 5th bullet point, it says salaries and benefits prevailing in the state labor market. Does that just mean public employee, state employees, or does it mean everyone, private sector, public? What does phrase mean?
I think in some part it means everyone, and I think I know Deb's in the room, so remember the last contract. I believe they came to us with trying to. One of the pieces of information that the union brought to us was trying to equate their salaries to other markets, to other jobs. So that is something that has come up in the past that they do look at. I think we haven't got to arbitration process. I haven't been through the process personally. But the biggest factor in arbitration, from what the attorneys have told us, is two things: Avon's ability to pay. And if you look at any of the indexes, we are number one in Hartford County, and we're close to the top in a lot of other statewide rankings, and what the statewide settlements are. So if we were to go to arbitration, they would look at our ability to pay and see it's top in Hartford County, and then they would look at the settlements, and we would have landed at a much higher settlement than we are now.
Okay, let me just see. Okay, then I have a question on the page. My notes are on the previous version, but the page, I forgot which slide number because it doesn't say a slide number here, but it's the slide that says highlights of teacher settlements 24 through 25 season.
Yes.
I'm seeing percentage comparisons. Do we ever do dollar comparisons?
We don't have access to that data, Margaret. This is what's is provided to us by the attorneys and provided to us. That's public knowledge. We don't have privy to some of the other pieces of it. This is all that we have privy to, and that's what is taken into account during that mediation arbitration process.
Okay, and then I have a non-dollar amount question. During the negotiations, is it mainly about just anything that's monetary, such as salaries, benefits, etc., or does it have any results or standards language? So in other words, does the agreement set out to have any teaching standards to be met, such as maintaining either reading and math proficiencies, because Avon's usually pretty good with that, etc., or just any kind of history to maintain the success that we've had in the past? Is any of that part of future wording in a contract?
No, it's more, a contract is more about working conditions, expectations in terms of, planning time and class sizes and high, seniority, and what happens if we have layoffs. We wouldn't want to, nor the attorney would recommend us to put any kind of incentives or target incentives into a contract. Anybody who's come to any of our sessions lately, and I'm sure Deb could highlight on this, we talked a lot about it Tuesday night. You know, the state just threw a new reading program out there. There's lots of things that change constantly that we wouldn't want to tie that kind of performance into a contract. That's not a standard thing to do.
Okay. And I think, wait, I thought I had one other, I think that was all my questions.
I've got one while you look.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm probably done.
So I see on a handout that we got, not the slides, but the memo, one of the bullets is compensation for class size coverages. There's a stipend increase to $2,000 per student for a teacher, PK through 5, for, I guess, every student that exceeds a class size maximum. Yeah. What can you, so what are the class size maximums?
They are there's a number of them. They are, Jess, do you have those right memorized off the top of your head?
I could do pretty well.
Yeah.
It's up to 20 in kindergarten. And we actually added language in this contract for our pre-K to be in line with the NEASC standards, which, you know, for the pre-K standards, that's going to run around 18 students, but it's really more the adult to student ratio for preschool, which is kind of its own animal. I believe it's up to 20 in kindergarten, 22 in grades 1 through 3, and then
I found it. It's 23, actually. I found it.
23 thing, and then it's 24 to 25, pretty much all the way up from 4th grade through 12th grade.
Okay. And then do you have an idea, like are all of our classes under these numbers, or are we?
So that's a great question. We make every attempt to keep our class sizes within that range. I think it's a shared belief that if we keep the class sizes at a reasonable level, it's in the best interest of our students here in the community. There are times, for lots of different reasons, that a class size might, slightly exceed in an area. We have enrollment changes during the course of a year. Sometimes we have space issues in certain buildings, and so that's where that language stems from. And generally speaking, historically, we and the teachers union agrees with this approach. The town, the Board of Ed will support those classrooms with some kind of staffing. So it may come in the form of a teaching assistant per se, who will work with that teacher to help bring the student to teacher ratio in that particular room down. It's in rare, there are some rare situations where we have provided that additional stipend for class size going over the contractual limits. Generally speaking, that tends to happen in the middle and high school years where, and again, it's rare, but when it does happen, that's where it tends to happen.
So I can tell you, Dan, since I've been here the 4 years, I think we've paid this once. So it's not something we generally look to do or want to do.
Okay. Margaret, did you find your question?
I'm good. That was it. I asked them all.
The teacher.
No, that's good. It's a good contract. I'd like to work under this contract. I wish mine was this nice. No, it's good. Our maxes in West Hartford for 4 or 5 are 27. So.
Oh, I found another question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
On the other packet where it said additional highlights and there was a retirement stipend, I'm pretty sure I can make this assumption, but I didn't want to make it an assumption. But where it says retirement stipend 3,000 to 3,500 or 3,750 to 4,250. I'm assuming it didn't have a qualifier. I'm assuming that means, is that per month?
No, that's a one-time payment. And the reason we agreed to that, the board agreed to that, is it's more advantageous for us that tied into that language, if you were to read that part of the contract, is notice. And they have to give us notice by a certain time. And that allows us then to budget for a replacement employee, which most of the time, if they've been here that long, is a less expensive employee. It lets us plan appropriately, perhaps even reduce a section or change class size, change class sections. So those monetary bonuses are actually usually save us money by paying them out
So
because of
that's-
those timelines they have to meet.
So is that something in order to get them to meet that timeline? And if they do, that's when they get this?
Correct. It's a one-time payment if they give notice in a certain time, and then the timelines are laid out. Sometimes they get it for at the time of retirement. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 years after. Sometimes if they give 3 years notice, it's the first within those 3 years. So there's in the retirement section, the contract it steps all of those out and really explains them pretty well.
All right. That's it.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you, Susan. Thank you, Jess. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deb. Do you want to say something? Yeah, go ahead.
Susan and Jess did a great job of highlighting things, but just from a board perspective, this is the third contract that I had the privilege to participate in as a board member. And our teachers recognized the struggle we had last year with the budget. They were very cognizant of that. This is the first time we did not go to mediation, and that was with intention on their part. They recognized that they would rather negotiate with us on our own than to have someone else extending. We would pay much more if we had. It just falls that way with the numbers. So I'm incredibly grateful to the staff that we have. We keep them for a long time because they're happy here. So that's one of the reasons we've established a strong reputation, and that's why so many people choose to move here. So recognizing our staff as being as qualified as they are, I think matters. We're always grateful to have someone from Board of Finance join us as well. So Kathleen took the time to do that with us. And I think she can testify that it was done with integrity and credibility. So we feel very good about it. We're proud to come in low. We recognize that we do pay them well. They recognize they are paid well. So that is a part of the conversation every time. So I just wanted to share that. We're very pleased with how this resulted.
Thank you. Brandon, maybe you want to share a perspective on budget impact from a high level. I mean, it's the biggest part of our budget, right?
Yes, right. Well, I mean, whenever you look at, the general fund operating budget as a whole, I think that the teacher's contract alone equates to about 30% of the total overall. So roughly, the general fund budget is about $100 million. $30 million is one contract. I mean, I think it's more than the total general fund operating budget for the town. But, keep in mind, it also covers costs for 283.3 employees. But it is important to keep in mind that, this contract basically, sets the mold for the rest of the budget. This is where the money is.
Yep.
I also completely agree with what Deb said in the sense that it's always best to keep these things in-house. You don't want to get mediators or, arbitrators involved. You want to try to come to an agreement with the bargaining unit that you're working with. And, Avon has a good story, but it's a tough story to tell to an arbitration panel in that context. We have very good metrics, and it is critically important for the public and for people to generally understand that there is a very elaborate statutory structure around this process. And like Susan said, what it values and what it weighs is ability to pay of the community and the welfare of the employee group. It has nothing to do with the willingness of the community to pay. So.
Okay, great. Thank you for everybody involved. Much appreciated. I think we need a motion to accept the contract.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
All right, 24, 25, 38, we have an appropriation from Police Special Services Fund for the purchase of a police vehicle. This Special Services Fund is, so this is one of the, all right, so it's a special revenue fund. I guess revenues earned are from police services to the community.
Private duty jobs, for instance, mostly for the utility companies.
And yeah, and the idea is to replace one of the active police vehicles. There's a vehicle with 100,000 miles on it with corrosion that will be replaced.
Does this affect what they were asking? I'm trying to remember, because I don't have it in front of me. Weren't there vehicles being asked for too,
So
or?
we are going to reduce one of those vehicles.
Okay.
So we'll take one out of the general fund capital budget, one out of the special services fund. And, you know, we still have a nice balance left. Even after this appropriation, there's 260,000.
How much gets added on a yearly basis? Is there like a?
You know, I'd have to look to give you a credible number. I mean, it's just a function of the jobs.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll get that for you.
So I'm sorry, just, how is this fund funded?
So if, you know, sometimes if Eversource or a contractor for Eversource has to do work,
Yeah.
they hire the police department to go out and just do traffic control and stand there and, you know, observe. And the contractor pays the town for the benefit of having the police officer stand there. They're on a private duty job. So they are working specifically for that client on that site. They're not available to respond to other calls. They're hired.
But they're salaried, so that's why it goes into the fund?
Well, we charge a different rate.
Okay.
So what we do is there's their basic rate that is charged in accordance with their collective bargaining agreement.
Okay.
But then we gross it up for administrative and other costs.
Okay.
So we more than capture our costs.
I was just trying to see where the money came from.
Yeah. So then
Here.
that revenue comes back into this special revenue fund.
And do the police get extra money for those jobs?
No,
Okay.
not any more than their regular rate.
Okay.
So they may take them on an overtime basis. I guess that could end up
Mhm.
being additional funding.
And that gets paid out of the
Charge to Eversource.
charge to Eversource or out of us?
Out of us.
But then do we in turn charge them?
Yes,
That's what this is.
right. There's some internal
Yeah.
transfer that goes on, but ultimately there's enough of an upcharge where a remnant is left in the special services fund that accrues to allow us to do
So
capital
so it's
purchases.
basically a wash or better?
Good way of looking at it.
All right, I will, any other questions? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the resolution for the purchase of the vehicle from Fund 07 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay.
We have an approval of motor vehicle tax refunds. I'll take a motion to approve the abatements or refunds.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And the town manager's report.
All right, so I'll keep it brief. You've got the purchasing update. One thing I want to mention is we're coming up on an expiration date for the Fisher bond lease. So we're going to be talking with the lessees, Roger and Isabel, to see what their plans are going forward. I'm sure they're going to want to stay on site. We're going to want them to stay on site. They've been doing a great job and just continue to be really good stewards of that property. So I don't know that there are going to be significant revisions to the agreement, but, you know, I don't think we're going to have much. They may have some things to talk about. At any rate, we'll be having those discussions over the next month or so, and I expect we'll come back with a revised agreement and February, March, somewhere in that range. In terms of construction updates, work continues on the public safety project. The Old Farms Road projects are kind of dormant right now. Staff is continuing to work with WMC on the preliminary design for the east-west portion. I'm not sure anything's going to be ready for February. Larry's got a couple of things he's trying to juggle right now, but perhaps February, March, somewhere in that time frame. North-south, obviously there's nothing going on there. However, we are planning to get the landscaping installed in the spring. So that's in the works. Just a note about this community connectivity grant. We've got about $114,000 that's been awarded through Grace's good efforts to take care of a number of projects related to the trail. Cedar Pavilion at the DPW trailhead, new water fountain with a bottle filler at Sperry Park, safety lighting inside the Route 44 underpass, replacement of the stone dust running path adjacent to the paved trail, various wayfinding signage, so kind of a laundry list of different items that we'll be able to tick off, and we're doing this conjunction with Bike Walk Avon. So,
speaking of which, can I just, I want to throw this out, I guess, on the record, and maybe just so that we as a council can keep abreast of this. In talking to Bike Walk Avon and hearing from the residents who do voice their opinions through that format. We did have that bike ped master plan, connectivity plan about how, we could, as a guiding principle for the next, 5, 7, 10 years, however long these plans last. Thought and pressure continues to look our way about what to do about 44, both I think at the Waterville route, Waterville section there, and as it connects to 44, as well as this area right outside our back door. And then, so I don't know if it's us on the council looking to our state legislatures for additional support on this or additional leverage, and even what appetite do we have to pursue a connection along 44 through those difficult areas that kind of bisects our community and our commercial areas. Especially if we're looking to support affordable housing, possibly up on Security Drive. I just think that if we put good money towards this connectivity plan, opportunities are going to come up. If we don't take advantage of them, they're going to pass us by. Last council meeting, I addressed that concern about Arch Road and the beacon improvements there, where the trail crosses it. Now I know that Arch Road is up for pavement management this year. I'm just going to bring it up again. Are we missing an opportunity here? That we've said so in the plan, and are we just going to look at it, or do we? But then I realized that something that as ambitious as that does take much more planning than just saying we're going to put it into next year's capital budget. Right. And so the same thing with beacons at the bottom of Arch Road or a 44 connection here. But these plans were there, and these recommendations are there, plans in rough. I would just urge us to keep that on the forefront of our minds, and if it is something that we're looking to do. Otherwise, it's just a piece of paper that we paid some good money for, and it sits there and it's just a guiding document, or maybe that's what it is, and maybe the conversation then back to Bike Walk is we do not think as ambitious, and we need to lower our expectations.
It was my
So-
understanding from one of the meetings that we had that work wouldn't be done on those state roads unless work was being done on the state roads. And I read those minutes from Bike Walk
Yeah.
Avon, and they had mentioned Canton in the minutes. And did Canton have specific work done and then they built that into it? Because I'm just not aware of work that's going to be
Were they
done on
referencing the
44.
study that they just had done?
No, they mentioned that Canton was moving forward with that.
They did a bunch of sidewalk work around the shops.
So maybe I think the question is like, is there work coming to 44 that we can jump onto?
Well, I don't know. And I mean, this is much bigger and longer plans than I'm referring to here. I mean, we can look back to the state's plans from the early 2000s to transform 44, and that, you know, died and petered away. And here we're layering study upon study, you know.
Well, also, doesn't Hiram often, when there's new business coming in, request for
the sidewalks? But I'm
Sidewalks
talking about
going in.
there's certain areas that are very challenging and very
Yeah.
difficult, and we don't have a solution for those. But it's a state thing. I don't know, maybe that's just me pie in the sky, or not me pie in the sky dreaming, but I'm saying the Bike Walk Avon and looking to have pedestrian access or some sort of access,
Yeah, I think
a multimodal access, if you will, from one end of our town to the other. It can't happen.
Look, I mean, I
support
think,
that also.
I think, well, and I think, you know, sidewalks go in easements. We have been, you know, as is about to be discussed, or has, you know, was just discussed, we've been successful about getting grants for sidewalks. We have a new legislator who famously rode his bike around all of the district. You know, there are avenues for this. And I think, yeah. So I think reaching out to our legislators it's going to be bond season soon. You know, this is where you're trying to get in their ears, and connectivity is hot right now. I think that's the direction to go. But I do think, you know, I don't think these are things that go necessarily in a capital plan for us without grant support, especially, you know, 44 region.
And these are very big projects that require a lot of time.
Yes.
I think the key is, you know, it's a matter of staying tuned into what projects the DOT has in the planning stages, which we're able to do through a couple of ways, including through CROG and the Transportation Committee. And then, you know, when those things come, we typically have a chance for input and saying, oh, well, have you thought about this? And here's our, you know, bike ped plan. Is there something that can be adapted here? And there, I mean, the state is all about Vision Zero and, you know, all of their bike ped stuff. So they're very amenable to trying to work with municipalities on that. So.
Yeah, and so I'm just, like I said, I'm just putting this out there again to be, you know, I'm not trying to shout at clouds and yell at the sky here, but I mean, it's something that I think I would appreciate our continued focus on. But that still doesn't address, you know, maybe the Arch Road is more of a conversation for when we get into our budget discussions, you know. But once again, I'm hearing it from my neighbors. Right. So just being a conduit.
Since Old Farms Road was brought up, and I remember we tabled my comment that instead of putting it in the other minutes, I just brought them where I can reread but I'll put it in my first what is it called? First person. So regarding the Old Farms Road project, I just want it to be on the record that I think there should also be a simpler alternate presented to the public before the Old Farms Road Phase 2 referendum wording is decided, that connects rails to trails to the Fisher Meadows trailhead by just crossing Old Farms Road instead of along Old Farms Road to the fields side of Fisher Meadows, since the trailhead trail already leads to the field side. And then the feasibility and pricing would need to include any fill, stone, and or trail bridges that would at least improve the flood-prone areas. So I know it's winter time, it probably can't be done, but I just wanted on the record that I've been feeling uncomfortable about not offering another option.
So, okay, so
By
just to be
fields,
clear,
do
we
you
had,
mean soccer fields?
The Fisher, well, it's,
Because the trailhead's on the other side, unless I'm totally thinking of the wrong.
well, I think it's a mixture
Are
of
you thinking of
fields.
the
It's
trailhead off of?
Old
off
Farms?
Old Farms,
off of Old-
very close to Country Club.
Yeah,
That's where the trailhead is, and then it has a trail where then at one point it splits and you can go around two different ways, and it leads to the softball, soccer, et cetera fields.
right.
So since this group didn't look at that area,
Right.
would that require requests for proposals for somebody to come and look at that whole separate area that wasn't under the study?
I don't know what you're asking.
Okay.
so you
Or-
want the
honestly.
price for paving that?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily have to be paved, but it would have to be, I've walked on it, it's very, very firm the way it is right now. It's more that even if someone from the town walked it, one of the employees who would be best suited to, walked it and gave some kind of feedback about that, just because that keeps getting brought up by people, and I think it's something we should at least look a little more in depth into. I don't know how far in depth we should.
So so there's already a trail there, so you want the price for improving that to some degree?
Well,
or-
I mean, there were concerns that people who like that as an option still agree that probably some things have to be improved because they brought up the flooding, et cetera.
Okay.
But it wouldn't necessarily mean that it has to be priced out for paving. That would be very expensive.
Okay.
But it's more of a comparison.
Okay.
You can't bike on it though, right? I mean, unless you had like a mountain
bike, you could.
Because I remember taking my daughter for, like, in the stroller on that once, and that, it was not suitable for that.
Well,
I
definitely, I thought that too, but
Unless it's changed now, I mean,
Yeah,
it's a long time
it
ago.
may have, I'm not sure, because when I went, my husband and I went on it, because I kept going back to that, so I said, I'm gonna see how firm this is. And there were people with racing bikes on it, they weren't mountain bikes, and they seemed okay, so I don't know if that just means over time.
So if I can understand this a little bit more, you're looking for the Fisher Meadow access road that DPW uses to access the is it the well that's there, the well tower? Mm-hmm. That there shouldn't be, number one, there shouldn't be any bikes on there because that's restricted to bikes. So if somebody was biking on there, they were doing so illegally. You're looking to say that should be the primary multimodal access from the one side of town down to the Fisher Meadow soccer fields in lieu of phase 2 multimodal path. Am I correct in assuming that that's what you're looking to say? Well, because there's a vocal minority out there that wants the removal of that multimodal path in order to reduce the cost of phase 2, and instead they want to put it under the Fisher Meadow trailhead and say that is the multimodal access down to the Fisher Meadow recreational fields. Is that what I'm getting at?
Well, I would.
Because that's the only
a
way that
few
I could
things.
understand it.
First of all, depending on the meeting, sometimes it's been the majority opinion, sometimes it's been 50-50. Every meeting, it seems to be different, but it seems to consistently come up. But it would be a good alternative to present so that people have two things to look at, even though it's.
But if I can counter that, I don't think it would be a good thing to look at. And the reason I think so is because that requires a completely different scope in order to say that is now going to be the primary multimodal path from what would be Country Club to the recreational fields. We didn't task our architects with coming up with two different plans in two different
Right.
complete areas.
Right,
And
I'm
so
not
I
talking
think
about
we're
Right.
probably pretty far in the game
Mhm.
to say that, well, let's put a stop here because really I think we should check out this other access road and use that as the multimodal path.
Well, what I would say though is, right now, we're kind of far in the game, but when this kept coming up, we were not as far in the game. So I just
But then
wanted,
why wasn't it integrated per your request into the requests to the contractor?
Because it was
That's what
not-
I'm getting
It was not something,
confused at.
we had not moved forward on that back when we had that meeting.
yeah,
We
I,
moved forward with the plan that we had in front of us. In fact, it was a unanimous vote that we moved forward on it. And the idea that that was then going to be an auxiliary plan, I thought that we had said that that wasn't an option at this time. That's what I thought.
We
had
left the
agreed to.
meeting with a unanimous consensus of what we were tasking them to
with
do.
that particular one, there was, I know we were jokingly calling it different things. There was like Barbara's option versus mine, but I know your version was the one that was covered, that
It wasn't my
encapsulated-
version, it
Well,
was,
No, but you made some good suggestions for altering.
right, from the whole conversation.
Right. And so that was a good compromise for that particular group of, I think, 4 options that we had. But then there was still the other opinion of, can we do something else instead of adding that? So this is just trying to address that,
Instead
kind
of
of in
saying,
hindsight, because I did
road
say
with-
stuff.
with the rail, with the trail or not, plus this.
But
So
again,
I see what you're
wouldn't
saying,
that require
but
a whole request for proposal on how much it would cost to do that trail over? It's a whole
It's-
different scope of a project.
Totally outside of the scope of what I thought we were tasked with.
Right, but
I'm just
thought-
saying, I don't think we can give the public that as an option because we don't know what that would cost. Like, we don't know what the fill would cost, we don't know, like, we have no idea because we aren't the engineers that have looked at it because they only looked at the road.
I don't even think it would be like same part of the same project, right? So
Right,
if
We can only say road without the trail or road with the trail. And road without the trail, maybe down the line, there's another request for proposal to see what you could do with that stretch of land. But we don't have that information to offer to the public, I think is the problem.
I think I was thinking more, we have a few different departments within the town where maybe some of the town employees, whether it's engineering or, I don't know could they somehow look at the feasibility and maybe they will find something where they would know definitely why it can't be done, but at least it would answer the question. They may know about a little more detail about the flooding. I don't know enough about
Can
that.
they do that, Brandon?
And you couldn't do it in the winter probably. but-
well, I mean, is it something that you could have a conversation with someone from DPW to answer your questions,
What are they-
Margaret?
What are they doing? What would I be tasking staff with doing with respect to that access road?
Seeing if, well, I guess, I like the way I worded it here, but
Would you like me
In
to just take
general-
that and review it and maybe talk with you about it?
yeah, that would be fine, but it could be more, is there a reason we are not allowing bikes on that trail? Why can't we change that?
Bikes are allowed on the trail.
On the access road?
Sure. I mean,
Are you
would-
sure?
Yeah, you wouldn't want to take your road bike, but there's no reason road bikes or any bikes can't go down there.
I swear there
That
was
makes
a, I
me feel
swear there
better
was a
because my
sign
kids
that,
go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I swear there was a sign that said no bikes allowed.
No.
Norm has told me no bikes allowed, but my kids and husband have done it, and so
Yeah.
now I'm like,
I thought
Yeah.
you couldn't bike on there either, but.
Yeah.
I saw bikers, but I didn't see a
Only
sign,
when
but
it's not
maybe I
flooded.
missed the sign. I don't.
I mean, look, the only improvements we would make to that road is, it's a dirt road. So over time, it gets ruts, it gets runouts. You may have to go through, you may have to compact it, you may have to grade it, you may have to put down some more gravel and sand.
Right.
Stone dust, to make sure the dust doesn't kick up. Beyond that, I don't know what we'd be doing to it.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't pave it because it's in a floodplain, and I can't do anything to it.
Right, and I agree, it shouldn't be paved, but what, those items you listed, but in addition, if someone were to look at where it floods and the situation there, is there an inexpensive way to add more fill, or,
I'm sure
I
the
don't know,
answer-
create a little bridge, you know, they'd have to look at it.
I'm sure the answer is no, because the entire area floods when the river floods. You couldn't build up enough of a levee or anything so that areas of that access road wouldn't flood.
But the entire length, you're saying floods, or just certain areas?
Well, I mean, maybe up towards Old Farms, it doesn't as much, but as you slope down, it certainly does.
Where it hits the fields is exactly where it does.
Yeah.
So
But
as
if
soon as
it's
you come out to
also
the
by
fields,
trailer,
you can't access the fields anymore, and in the opposite way, you cannot access that trail because of where the fields meet that trail, that's where it floods out.
So if
Even
it
in
floods,
lighter rain.
but if it floods, wouldn't we also probably have flooded fields where maybe it wouldn't be used as much anyway? So maybe the flood times are not what we should focus on? I don't know, it's more of a question. I just feel like it came up so many times, and it seemed like some of the people asking the questions, they knew a lot.
Well, I guess in response to that, it's not really about people accessing the fields, it's so much as that side of town accessing the rest of town. Because the reason why they would be taking that is to get to the rails to trails through Country Club. So it doesn't really matter if, you know, they're playing soccer or not. That's how, the whole point of putting a multi-use trail along that road is to get people to have access to the fields, to that side of town, to the rest of town, to the schools.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but if the only portion is, you know, days of flooding, if those are the only days, I'm just trying to think of a compromise, that's all. Not a compromise, a different,
Well, I guess my question would
just
be,
trying
why
to
are people
pursue-
using it to such a large degree now then? If it's around, like, is it heavily used right now? Is that I mean, I don't
well, I
know
would
what the use
think
is.
it would be, some of the people who would use that would probably be the same people who might be using Old Farms, not everyone. But, so there could be an overlap there. And that's where I thought maybe we could have just another option out there, even if it weren't, obviously it's not with the same group, and it might not be an official request for proposal, but just something where we can get some feedback, a little more detailed feedback about that possibility. And it may cause people to go, oh, I thought it was possible, now I agree it's not, or people may say, oh, I still think we should try it. I don't know how it would be received, but at least it would be more information.
Maybe you could have Larry just give a quick opinion on what would be required to keep it flooding, what kind of levee system.
I will talk with him.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it wouldn't, and not anything fancy, just what's reasonable. And
I mean, I think the answer is there's not gonna be anything reasonable is a problem, and then that's just, but that's kind of where you're
Yeah.
going with this, is there's a
Right.
story to go back to.
right, but also maybe he would know how often, and is it just 2 weeks in the year? How often is it 2 months of the year? How often does it flood where it's really the issue? And if it's really not that often, that may change his opinion or his advice.
I think like the big, I think the people who want us to use that trail instead aren't really even interested in us improving that trail at all. They just say there already is something there.
Right, they may
We're
not.
just interested
right.
in the Old Farms Road without a trail.
Right.
And just, so I don't know.
I agree. I think that's what
So
quite a
maybe
few
it's
of
not
them.
even really worth doing like a price analysis of what it would cost to make,
Yeah.
you know, the one that runs along the river passable at all times. It's more about just what's the price difference between having a trail and not having a trail run alongside Old Farms Road. In which case we kind of got an answer for that already, and it was like around $1 million maybe a little more than 1.25 if I remember right. Which is kind of part, yeah, it's $1 million and a little, but in the context of the $6 million project, or 12 million, right? 12 million to maybe like 7 to 12, is the kind of range we're looking at. Anyway, I think the public does have a sense now of like how, or at least we have a sense that we can tell the public. I think it's going to be an extra 1.5 or 1 to 1.5 to add that multimodal path next to it. That's the kind of information they need to know whether or not they support the project or not. If it fails at referendum, then yeah, I think we'll be coming back to it, looking at it, I guess, probably without a path. And
Right, that's what I was trying to say before about people using it. Like, I think the question really is, should we have a path or not have a path? Not alternate path, because the people that are supporting the path are not using that currently as an option, I don't think. And I think the people that would be against the path and then might say, well, this is cheaper, I don't think, like Dan said, they're actually truly interested in a path. They're interested in a road without the trail.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like some of the people, though, who were asking about this were people who biked. These weren't people who weren't interested. So that's the reason I thought, well, they bike more than I do, and it's a good question. So I just.
Right, well, maybe there's, maybe trial and error for people who are actually out there and they know there's a reason why they don't use it often. So I guess if there's a way to say how usable it is in its current state.
Or with minor adjustments, not major, yeah.
Okay, so nothing else under construction updates. The ARPA updates are included in your packets, and as you probably know, the legislative session kicked off yesterday. And this is a long session this year. Both Capital Region Council of Governments, CCM, COST, everybody has their legislative agenda. So we'll see what happens. And that's all I have for manager report, other than we are continuing to make progress on the acquisition for 200 Fisher. And if all goes well, we'll be able to close by the end of the month. So it's coming together. And I do have one item for executive session.
Okay.
Could we set up a tour with you to
Sure. Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'd like that too.
I'd love to see it under the hood.
Happy to.
All right, I think we need a motion to enter executive session.
So moved.
I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. We're
Thank you for coming.
going into top secret mode.